Okay, so in this lesson, we're going to look at linear and quadratic functions, and we're going to find the difference quotient of each of those linear and quadratic functions. Now, in a previous lesson, you learned where the difference quotient came from, how to derive the difference quotient. In this lesson, we're just going to work examples and showing what the work should look like. So remember, though, that the difference quotient is this. It has this form. So it's f of x plus h minus f of x, and all that's being divided by h. So that's the difference quotient. That's the formula for the difference quotient. The difference quotient does have some applications in calculus, and you're going to see that idea when you get to that point. But basically what we're going to do here is just given a linear or quadratic function, how do we use this formula to find the difference quotient? How does it look? Okay, so let's look at the first one. So let's find the difference quotient of each of the following. So find the difference quotient. And you have to show the work. You must show the work. Okay, so we're going to start out with the linear function. So here's number one. Let's suppose that f of x is equal to 5x plus 9. 5x plus 9. And so basically, you want to find the difference quotient of this function. Now here's the formula for the difference quotient. So the first thing you should do, if you want to do it in steps, the first thing you should do is find this first part of the numerator. So we have to find f of x plus h. So it'll be step one. So I'm going to call this step one. So step one, find f of x plus h. Okay? So basically, remember what that means. So you've had experience in previous lessons on finding functions, function values, either at a variable or at a constant. And so basically, where we see the variable x, you're going to substitute x plus h. All right, so this becomes 5 times x plus h plus 9. And then the next step is to get rid of the parentheses, so we get 5x plus 5h plus 9. Okay, and then if you can combine like terms, you combine like terms. These terms are all different, so I cannot combine them. So that was step one. So all you've done now was you found this part here. That's all you found. Then the next thing I'm going to do is call step two. So step two is still dealing with the numerator. So I found step one. Now this whole thing up here is going to be step two. All right, so let's do it that way. Let's call it step two. So step two then is to find the numerator. Find f of x plus h minus f of x. Okay, so the numerator. So we found this part, that's this. So this becomes 5x plus 5h plus 9 minus, now you got to be careful here, you're subtracting f of x. So you're subtracting your function. This is your function, f of x. So you're subtracting all of this. You must put that in parentheses. And the reason is if you don't put that in parentheses, most students only subtract the first term and forget about all the other terms. So you must put that in parentheses. If you don't, you will make a mistake. Then the next step is to get rid of the parentheses. So we have 5x plus 5h plus 9 minus 5x minus 9. You see, if you had not put the function in parentheses, you would have probably said 5x plus 9. And it should have been 5x minus 9. All right, now let's combine like terms. You will notice that, and that should be a 5h right here. You will notice that every term that does not have an h in it, see, this does not have an h, this does not have an h as a factor, this does not have an h as a factor, and this does not have h as a factor. This is the only one that has an h as a factor. Every time, in every situation, for linear quadratic functions that we're going to work with, this is what's going to happen. Every term that doesn't have a factor of h will cancel out. 5x, you'll see its opposite. So 5x and its opposite, 0. 9 and its opposite, 0. The only thing that's left is 5h. So the only terms that should be left would be terms that have factors of h. So that's step 3. So you found the numerator, right? So you found the numerator. Now all you do is take step 2 and divide by h. So step 3 would be to actually find your difference quotient. So f of x plus h minus f of x divided by h. So remember, this is your step 2 right here. That was step 2, which is just this. So you're going to say 5h divided by h, and then reduce, you get 5. So the answer, you're going to say this. You're going to say f of x plus h, so the difference quotient for your function f of x minus f of x divided by h equals 5. And so that's your answer. That's all you do. It helps if you say step 1, step 2, step 3. It keeps your thoughts organized. And notice the way I'm doing it, every mathematical statement is correct. All right, so remember, you are graded on your statements. So if your statements are not mathematically correct, even though you get that final answer, you're not getting full credit. So your statements must be mathematically correct. All right, let's look at one more linear, and then we'll do some quadratics. So let's look at this one, number 2. Let's suppose that my function f of x is equal to, let's say, 7 minus 8x. 7 minus 8x. All right, so again, I want to find the difference quotient. So go ahead and write the difference quotient. This is what you want to find, f of x plus h minus f of x, all divided by h. So again, step 1, find the first part of your numerator. So step 1, let's find f of x plus h. So remember what that means. That means you go to your function f of x, and so here's your function f of x, and just go ahead and rewrite it. And where we see the variable x, you're going to substitute x plus h. So this becomes 7 minus 8 times x plus h, and I'll get rid of the parentheses, 7 minus 8x minus 8h. And then notice those are not like terms, so that's all you can do. So that was just step 1. So all you did was you find this right here. That's all you found. Step 2 is now where you're going to finish off the numerator. You're going to deal with the numerator now, the whole numerator. So you're going to subtract your function. So step 2 is where you're going to say, well, I found part of my numerator. Now let's find the rest of it. Okay, so that's the numerator. So this is your step 1 right here, right? So just go ahead and rewrite it. So 7, so that's going to equal 7 minus 8x minus 8h minus, in parentheses, be careful, you're subtracting your function. So it's important you put that in parentheses, which is 7 minus 8x. Remember, that's f of x. F of x is this. So 7 minus 8x. Now get rid of the parentheses. So I get 7 minus 8x minus 8h minus 7. And then when you subtract the negative 8x, that becomes a positive 8x. At this point, remember, in step 2, at this point, every term that does not have a factor of h better have its opposite listed, and it will cancel out. 7, negative 7. That becomes 0. Negative 8x, positive 8x. That becomes 0. And so all you're left with is the term with the factor of h. So you get negative 8h. So notice that step 2 is your numerator. Now all you have to do in step 3 is take step 2 and divide it by h. So step 3 is actually where you're going to do the find the difference quotient. So you see, this is your step 2 right here, which is negative 8h. So negative 8h divided by h, the h's divide out, and you're left with negative 8. And so therefore your answer, you're going to say your difference quotient, f of x plus h minus f of x divided by h, is going to equal negative 8. Okay? And so that's all you do. Now let's look at, and those are the steps. So you can do the same steps with a quadratic. Now the quadratic will be a little bit more involved because it's a quadratic. It's not a linear. Okay, so let's look at number 3. Let's suppose number 3, we had this quadratic function, f of x is equal to, let's say, 2x squared minus 3x plus 5. 2x squared minus 3x plus 5. So again, I want to find the difference quotient. So f of x plus h minus f of x divided by h. Now this is going to be a little bit more involved, so you can see how involved it's going to be in y. Just like in the previous problems, you're going to find step 1. So step 1. So actually say step 1. So step 1. Step 1, find f of x plus h. Now, let me go ahead and rewrite the function over. So here's the function, 2x squared minus 3x plus 5. So notice that wherever we see the variable x, this is what you're going to substitute, x plus h. I see a variable x here and here, okay? So you're going to replace the variable x with this binomial x plus h. So this becomes 2 times in parentheses, you're substituting x plus h. Don't forget though, you're squaring that, minus 3 times in parentheses, x plus h, plus 5. See, it's a little bit more involved. Now you got to figure out what x plus h squared is. Okay, so you go off to the side, and you're going to say x plus h times itself. In a previous lesson, you learned how to multiply x plus h by itself. So let's do it again. You're going to use the FOIL method. X times x is x squared. The outer is xh. The inner is also xh. And the last h times h is h squared. Combine like terms, I get x squared plus 2xh plus h squared. So that trinomial goes here. All of that, see this is this trinomial right here. All that those be multiplied by 2, so you got to say 2 times this trinomial, just like this. And then let's go ahead and distribute the negative 3. So that's minus 3x minus 3h plus 5. Now let's go ahead and get rid of the parentheses here. Let's use the distributive property. So we get 2x squared, 2 times 2xh is 4xh. 2 times h squared is 2h squared, and then minus 3x minus 3h plus 5. Okay, so that's your step 1. And you'll notice that in your step 1, none of these are like terms. Okay, step 2. So you see how more involved this was? So when you had a linear function, see with the linear function, step 1 was fairly straightforward, right? Step 1 in a quadratic, there's a little bit of work you had to do. You see? A little bit of work you had to do. Now be careful with your distributing. You could easily make a mistake and mess you up. All right, step 2. So remember in step 2, that's where you found your numerator. So you found step 1, now you're going to subtract your function. So step 2, you're going to say f of x plus h minus the function. So this is your f of x plus h right here. Okay, remember this right here? That's all of this. So all of this is this. So this is all these terms. So you're going to say 2x squared plus 4xh plus 2h squared minus 3x minus 3h plus 5. So all of that, all of this is just this. But don't forget, you're subtracting your function. So you got to say subtract your function, which is this trinomial. So 2x squared minus 3x plus 5. Okay? Just like we did with step 2 in the linear. You see, now you're going to get rid of the parentheses. So now you're going to distribute the negative through here. So this becomes 2x squared plus 4xh plus 2h squared minus 3x minus 3h plus 5. And then distribute, you get minus 2x squared. The opposite of a negative 3x is a positive 3x. And the opposite of positive 5 is a negative 5. Remember, when we went back over step 2, at the end of step 2, every term that does not have an h in it, its opposite better be present so that way they cancel out. And then what? See, this doesn't have an h, right? A factor of h. It's 2x squared, negative 2x squared. There's its opposite. So when you add two opposites together, you get 0. This has a factor of h. This has a factor of h. This does not. Its opposite better be around, and it is. Negative 3x, positive 3x has to be 0. This has a factor of h. This does not. 5, negative 5, that becomes 0. So the only thing left over is 4xh plus 2h squared minus 3h, and those are not like terms. All right, now, that's your numerator. That is the numerator. So now let's go to step 3. Step 3 is where is this right here, f of x plus h minus f of x divided by h. So step 3 is where you take step 2. Remember, this is your step 2 right here. That's this. 4xh plus 2h squared minus 3h, and then you divide by h. Now, listen carefully. The difference between, again, another difference between step 3 and step 3 here is that this was only one monomial. See that? Only one monomial. And the h's would divide out, and you'd be left with this coefficient. Here, though, you have 3 terms in the numerator. And the GCF, you want to factor out the GCF. The GCF is h. Okay, the GCF here is h. So let's go ahead and factor out the h. So when I factor out the h, I get h times 4x plus h times 2h is 2h squared minus h times 3 is negative 3h. All divided by h's. And then just like they reduced here, these now reduce. And then your answer is 4x plus 2h minus 3. That's your answer. So in other words, you're going to say the answer, the difference quotient f of x plus h minus f of x divided by h equals this right here, 4x plus 2h minus 3. Okay? All right. Let's look at another one. So there's number 4. Number 4, let's suppose we had f of x is equal to negative 3x squared plus 6x minus 5. Let's say we had that. Okay, so we have this quadratic. So we know there's quite a bit of work to do. Took a whole page for that. Can you see that? Took a whole page. So we know there's quite a bit of work to do to finding the difference quotient, but you do it in steps. So if you want to find the difference quotient, which is f of x plus h minus f of x, all divided by h, you do it in steps. So step 1, let's go ahead and find f of x plus h. So remember what that means. Let me go ahead and rewrite the function over. So here's my function, negative 3x squared plus 6x minus 5. So wherever we see the variable x, I'm going to substitute x plus h. So this becomes negative 3 times x plus h squared plus 6 times x plus h minus 5. Now again, just like we did with this one, you have to get rid of the parentheses, but remember you got to square first and then multiply. All right, over here, you got to square first. So that's where you go and you do this part here. I want you to notice though, this part, x plus h squared, will always be the same as with every other quadratic function. That part here, when you go and you do this, you're always going to get the same trinomial. So if you don't know that, just go ahead and redo it again. X plus h times x plus h, and then use the FOIL method. So when I use the FOIL method, x times x is x squared, the outer is xh, the inner is also xh, and the last h times h is h squared. Combine like terms, you get x squared plus 2xh plus h squared. So what the point being that whenever you square x plus h, it's always going to be this. So every quadratic function, you're going to be squaring x plus h. This is what this trinomial should always be. See it? Okay. So that, though, is just this piece here. This part, this factor here. That's got to be multiplied by 3. So this becomes 3 times this trinomial, x squared, plus 2xh, plus h squared. And then let's go ahead and distribute the 6, plus 6x, plus 6h, minus 5. And now let's go ahead and distribute the 3. I get 3x squared, plus 6xh, plus 3h squared, plus 6x, plus 6h, minus 5. Okay? All right, now, at this point, nothing is going to cancel out. There aren't any like terms. Okay? That occurs in step 2. So that's why it's a good idea to do your little steps. So all you found here is there's this part of the numerator. Now let's go ahead and find the numerator. So step 2 is to find the numerator. So f of x plus h minus f of x. All right, so this we already found. That's all these terms here. 3x squared plus 6xh plus 3h squared plus 6x plus 6h minus 5. And then you're subtracting your polynomial, which is this. So you're subtracting f of x, and remember f of x was your trinomial, was your quadratic function. So minus 3x squared plus 6x minus 5. Now let's go ahead and get rid of the parentheses now. And so we get 3x squared plus 6xh plus 3h squared plus 6x plus 6h minus 5. And then we're taking the opposite of all these terms. So the opposite of negative 3x squared becomes a positive 3x squared. The opposite of a positive 6x becomes a negative 6x. The opposite of a negative 5 becomes a positive 5. Now it is at step 2, remember, where every term that does not have a factor of h, its opposite better be around so you can distribute. Now I made a mistake somewhere, and the reason I know I made a mistake is because look, 3x squared doesn't have an h in it, right? Okay, so its opposite is not there. So I made a mistake. So here's where the mistake was. When I went here, That was negative 3. You saw what I put? A positive 3. And it's an easy fix. It's an easy fix. So you see that becomes negative 3, negative 3. So that means this is a negative 3x minus 6h, 6xh, and then minus 3h squared. So that was the easy fix there. So that was a mistake. Okay, and then over here I got to fix this now. Minus 3x squared minus 6x minus 3h squared minus 3x squared minus 6x minus 3h squared. Okay, so that was a mistake, and I knew I made a mistake, and this is going to happen to you. It will. Trust me, it happens all the time, where when you go at this point, you better have everything canceled out except the terms that have an h in it. All right, so I knew there was a mistake, so you go and you find it, and this is where it was. I forgot I put a positive 3 instead of a negative 3. So you just go and you fix it, and now notice what happens. Negative 3x squared, positive 3x squared. 6x, negative 6x. Negative 5, positive 5. And notice the only terms left are the terms with factors of h. So minus 6xh minus 3h squared plus 6h. All right, so that was your step 2. Step 3 now, so we're almost done. Step 3 is where you take, is actually where you take the numerator and divide it by h. So f of x plus h minus f of x divided by h. So this numerator is this. So I get negative 6xh minus 3h squared plus 6h divided by h. Now, at that point, remember you want to factor out the h. Go ahead and factor out the h. All right. Now, you also notice that there's a factor of 3. Just leave that alone. Just factor out the h because you want to reduce it with that h down there. Okay, so just to factor out the h. So this becomes h times negative 6x is negative 6xh minus h times 3h, it'll be negative 3h squared, and then h times 6 will be 6h. All divided by h, and now notice these divide out, and so the answer is negative 6x minus 3h plus 6. Leave it like this. Don't factor out the 3. And so your answer, you're going to say this. You're going to say f of x plus h minus f of x divided by h equals negative 6x minus 3h plus 6. Okay? And so there's your answer. All right, let's look at another one. So the more you do, the easier it gets. Now, keep in mind that that our difference quotient had the function notation f. Okay, it doesn't always have to be f. Okay, it depends on what your function is. So, for example, just listen carefully to what I'm about to say. Let's suppose I had number 5, and let's suppose number 5 was g of x is equal to, and let's say, let's do another negative x squared. So let's say negative, actually let's do negative x squared. So negative x squared minus 6x plus 1. Let's say we had that. Okay, and you want to find the difference quotient. Find the difference quotient. Okay, now remember the difference quotient, let me go ahead and use this one. Remember the difference quotient, we defined it as this, right? So f of x plus h minus f of x over h. But the difference quotient here for this function is g. So instead of using f, I'm going to say g. So in other words, g of x plus h minus g of x divided by h. So see, it corresponds to your function, to the function name. But most of the time, when they ask you to find the difference quotient, the function notation will be f of x, so you don't get confused. All right, but I just want to be aware because you may see this in some problems where the function is not f of x but g of x. But you just replace f with g. Okay. So the first thing you're going to do, step 1, is you're going to find g of x plus h. Okay, so you go to your function g, which is this. Now you got to be careful with that one, and I'll explain as we go. So you go to your function g of x, and where we see the variable x, you're going to substitute x plus h. Okay. Now be careful because most students get confused because they don't see a number there, like -2, -5. Remember those, it's only to be -1. So if you need to, put a -1 there. No big deal. So this becomes, and now I'll go ahead and do that. -1 times, in parentheses, x plus h squared, right? minus 6 times x plus h plus 1. Now let's go ahead and deal with x plus h squared. So remember, x plus h times x plus h using the fall method. Remember, that's going to be x squared plus 2xh plus h squared. So that goes here, and then you're multiplying by negative 1, so x squared plus 2xh plus h squared. And then let's go ahead and distribute the negative 6, so minus 6x minus 6h plus 1. Now let's go ahead and distribute the negative 1, so I get negative x squared minus 2xh minus h squared minus 6x minus 6x h plus 1. Okay, so that's the end of step 1. Now let's do step 2. So step 2 is this numerator. So let's find the numerator now. G of x plus h minus g of x. So I found g of x plus h. That's all of this. I just got to subtract the function g from it. All right, so that's going to be this. You're going to say negative x squared minus 2xh minus h squared minus 6x minus 6h plus 1, and then subtract your function. Negative x squared minus 6x plus 1. It's important that you put that in parentheses, because now you got to distribute all of these. All the signs change. So I get negative x squared minus 2xh minus h squared minus 6x minus 6h plus 1, and then the opposite of a negative x squared becomes a positive x squared. The opposite of a negative x becomes a positive 6x, and the opposite of a positive 1 becomes a negative 1. And now remember, at this point, every term that doesn't have a factor of h better have its opposite, so it adds up to be 0. And it does. Look, negative x squared, positive x squared, 0. That has an h, that has an h. This is not negative x, negative 6x, positive 6x becomes 0. That has a factor of h. This is not positive 1, and a negative 1 is 0. So the only terms that are left are the terms that have a factor of h. Okay? And so those are not like terms. And so that's the end of step 2. And you're almost done. Step 3, remember, is where you look at your difference quotient now. G of x plus h minus g of x divided by h. So you found the numerator. That's this. Negative 2xh minus h squared minus 6h divided by h. And at that point, remember, is where you want to factor out just the h. So reduce with the h that's down there. So you get h times negative 2x is this, and then h times a negative h is negative 2h squared, and then h times a negative 6 is a negative 6h, all divided by h, and now these divide out, and so you get negative 2x minus h minus 6. And so your answer, you're going to say g of x plus h minus g of x divided by h equals this, negative 2x minus h minus 6. All right? And next semester, if you take business calculus, or the semester after that when you take calculus, you're going to understand the purpose of finding the difference quotient. Okay, so that was number 5. All right, let's look at number 6. Let's do another quadratic. Let's say f of x is, let's say 6x minus 5x squared. So let's say it's this. So 6x minus 5x squared. Okay? All right, so we're going to do step 1. So you want to find the difference quotient. So step 1 is to find f of x plus h. So where you see the variable x, you're going to substitute x plus h, right? And so I get 6 times x plus h minus 5 times x plus h squared, right? Okay. And so let's go ahead and distribute this. So I get 6x plus 6h. Now for this one, I got to square first. So remember, you got to say x plus h times itself. And then FOIL that out. X times x is x squared. The outer is xh. The inner is also xh. And the last, h times h, is h squared. So you get x squared plus 2xh plus h squared. So that becomes minus 5 times this trinomial, x squared plus 2xh plus h squared. Okay? Now go ahead and distribute the negative 5. So you get negative 6x plus 6h minus 5x squared. A negative 5 times 2xh is a negative 10xh. And a negative 5 times h squared is a negative 5h squared. All right, so that's step 1. None of these will be like terms. So you're done with step 1. Step 2 now is where you're finding the numerator of the difference quotient. So you're saying f of x plus h minus f of x. So that's your numerator. So you already found this part. That's this. So you're going to say 6x plus 6h minus 5x squared minus 10xh minus 5h squared, and then you're subtracting your function. Your function is this right here. So you're subtracting 6x minus 5x squared. Now you can get rid of this, so you're going to add the opposite. So you get 6x plus 6h minus 5x squared minus 10xh minus 5h squared. The opposite of 6x is a negative 6x. The opposite of a negative 5x squared is a positive 5x squared. Now it is at the end of step 2 where every term that does not have at least one factor of h in it will have its opposite listed. 6x, negative 6x adds up to be 0. That has a factor of h. Negative 5x squared and a positive 5x squared adds up to be 0. And all you're left with are terms with factors of h. So this is what we have. We have 6h minus 10xh minus 5h squared. And none of these are like terms. That was just step 2. Step 3 now is where you divide step 2, the numerator, by h. Okay? And so there's your numerator right here. That's the numerator. That goes here. So that becomes 6h minus 10xh minus 5h squared, all divided by h. All right, you have to show that. You also have to show that you're factoring out an h. So you get h times 6 is 6h minus h times 10x is 10hh, and then minus 5h, h times minus 5, negative 5h is negative 5h squared, all divided by h, and now these divide out, and your answer is just 6 minus 10x minus 5h. And so your difference quotient, so the answer, f of x plus h minus f of x divided by h equals 6 minus 10x minus 5h. Okay, and so that's it. That's all you do. So that is, and that should be enough for you to be able to do these very easily. And so that is the lesson on just working problems, linear and quadratic problems on the difference quotient. So that'll be the end of this lesson.